General. Welekazi in 1983 tweets and says, whoever said statistics were boring, and saying that a place where a light shines, Mkanyagude, from far, hashtag Census, is this guy a pastor? Asking about the Statistician General. I'm so enjoying his presentation. That one came from Welekazi. Now to the Statistician General, a question. Jude Stevens tweets, where can I get a copy of the statistics that are being displayed? That's the one question. Where can I get a copy of the statistics that are being displayed? And then there's one also to the Statistician General from Sekhale Mokhotsi. Hi, Vuyo. Stats SA can't be correct, says Sekhale Mokhotsi. They are estimates. Many families were not counted. I'm one of them, and my family was not counted as well. Let's hear from the Statistician General now. Where's the information available from? And some people were not counted. Peter?
Vuyo, thank you very much indeed, and warm welcome back to viewers at home here in Sandton, where we're busy talking about those precious statistics. Okay, the first one, where can people access this information? Because I guess there's no point compiling it if people can't get hold of it.
Oh yes, I mean, we are unlike a traditional healer who keeps his medicines and the knowledge to himself. The data is all available on our website, www.statssa.gov.za. www.statssa.gov.za. And it's in multimedia. There is the Rombi, where you can actually, on the press of a button, running through provinces, you see the changes over time.
Okay, and those that don't have access to the internet,
they can just write to us, to our information desk. They can get all the addresses there. And then we can provide the paper-based documents. The problem is we don't want to print
too many
when there is no demand for that.
Okay.
So and then, of course, on your cell phone, because everybody has a cell phone, there are mobile devices where you can just log on to our website, and then you get the data back to yourself.
All right. So the other thing, and this is quite an important one, you yourself had said that you wanted an undercount of single digits. It came out at 14.6%, which means there's a lot of people that weren't counted. What impact does that have? Are these figures correct, as this viewer pointed out?
You know, we run surveys, and we run surveys on the basis of 30,000 households, samples across the country. That is 0.006%. It's almost, it's 0.5% of all households. And out of that, we come with very robust estimates on unemployment and so on and so on. Statistics is a science that is very amazing. Now, when we've counted 86% of the population, and then we have this scientific process of adjusting for the undercount. Indeed, I started by saying, surely a person who leaves at 4 o'clock in the morning and comes back at 10 will never be counted. In South Africa, you know, you don't have addresses. In Australia, in the US, they send the questionnaires by post. And then it waits for you until you have filled it. And then they follow up with a phone call. And this questionnaire will be there for 4 months, and they'll still collect it from you. Well, imagine keeping a person at your doorstep for 4 months. How much will it cost? We don't have addresses. We have all those logistical problems. But we are comforted in the science of sampling theory, where you draw a sample through what is called a post-enumeration survey. And on the basis of that post-enumeration survey, you adjust for those who have not been covered.
All right, so that 84% is a really good indicator of what the probability is.
The 86% of the population was counted. If you got 86% in your class mark of metric, that's cum laude. So what's this?
Okay. All right. So how much did it cost? Can we ask?
Oh, well, I wouldn't like to answer the question directly and answer how much it cost. Yeah. I would say, suppose it was like Mkanyakude. What would you say you know? It would be so dark.
Right. So
and ignorance is very expensive, just as poverty. Now, knowledge provides you with the understanding by which you can tackle current and future problems and understand the past. Well, in terms of rands and cents, it's 3.4 billion rands. But try ignorance to allocate 300 billion rands a year to local authorities. And every 5 years or every 10 years, you use 3.4 billion to try and have rationale in terms of that allocation.
So it's invaluable information.
It's really cheap.
Okay. All right, let's go straight to our tables because I'm very fearful we're going to run out of time here. Let's go to table number 15. Is that Matome Mudipa? Table 15.
Thank you. To satisfy the professors in the future, when are you planning to conduct the next census? And are you ready to make sure that the professors won't question?
Yeah. So when's the next one? And is a 10-year interval sufficient, or should they be more frequent?
No, the Act is for every 5 years you should run a census.
Yeah.
We couldn't run a census in 2006 per Statistics Act because Kanamea, and a very interesting MP, said in 1996 you'll dug your grave, in 2001 you fell in the grave, 2006 you'll bury you. And indeed he was correct because Stats SA was very weak at the time. If you flash your mind back in photogenic media, the stories that were flashing in Stats SA were not very lacquer. And if we tried the census in 2006, it would have buried us. But now, try the organization now, it's formidable. We can, I'm sure, run a census in 2016. The Act prescribes that. But there are other considerations such as costs, such as that, alternative sources of information. All those are being considered as we move towards 2016. The professors, no, we will be wrong to argue that professors should not query. That's their task.
Right.
That's what they should do as academics. Everything they must question and put to scrutiny. The only problem is when they try to put things to scrutiny and think that they can also determine the timetable. They cannot have the key to knowledge and control the timetable. Then there will be monkeys in their forest and be judges at the same time. It can't be correct. It cannot be correct.
So what they need is water from Jericho.
They want water from Jericho. Okay. I was blind, but now I found. I was,
this is why the viewer.
But now I see. See that's.
This is why the viewer thinks you're a pastor. Okay, table number 10. JP Landman's got a very interesting question. Table number 10, JP.
Good morning. Sir, to what do you ascribe the fact that the bottom age group, 0 to 4 years, that is suddenly bigger than the other ones? It's an outstanding feature of this year's population structure. And how do you explain it? What do you think are the reasons for it?
It's a very true observation that we also made. But we know that these kinds of things happen. We know the baby boom of the 1940s, where that phenomenon actually occurred. We also know that it is a feature of low fertility regimes across the world, where a small fluctuation can occur and then fertility just suddenly rises and you see that 0 to 4 increasing. It's very difficult at the moment to nail this down in South Africa why it has happened. But the reason why it has happened doesn't remove the fact that it exists. So, Molana had lost his coin, and he was looking for it, and somebody asked, Molana, what are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for my coin. I asked him, where did you lose it? He says, well, I'm looking for it where there's light. I don't know where I lost it, but I'm looking for it where there's light. So the phenomena exists, but the reasons for it are not very clear. But what we do know that South Africa before 1994, was a country under serious stress. Even after 94, it was a country under serious stress and violence. And then we had an attack of HIV and AIDS. We know that this thing has been reversed in terms of scientific discoveries and retrovirals. And perhaps there is a narrative that might be woven and understand how individual families and females make decisions around their fertility behaviors. That is what we have to find out. It's not uncommon across the world. In Mauritius, we see the same kind of thing, reversals in fertility. In fact, in Europe at the moment, because it is an aging, there is a demographic cold in Europe. There are incentives that are being put in place so that people can start being fertile. And it might be paying off in some regimes in Europe and the like. So these things how strongly held to your opinions vis-a-vis what the evidence that comes from the ground is. And I think that's the beauty of science, that it refutes your strongly held what could be equal to religion. Because once you have those strongly held views, then you are religious, then you don't have space to be in the scientific world at all.
All right, so just to add on to that question there, your statistics suggest that 60% of our population is under the age of 35. What does that mean for the future? What are the implications of such a young population?
You see, a young population can be a demographic dividend or a poison chalice. And in South Africa, with the education that we have, the absence of mathematics and science, the creation of math literacy, that, my child, I want you to pass, the teacher says, oh, the school must pass. So the parents, the teacher, and the child all want the same thing, and they want the easy way out. And I think that's the problem. And I think what we are doing is to glorify our Prime Minister Verwoerd, because he said, what's the use of teaching Bantu child the mathematics when it can't use it in practice? When you look at the Indian graph, those guys were doing mathematics and science. The trade unionists, the politicians of the time, if you look at the subjects that they were dealing with, pharmacists and so on, they were in scientific, while the blacks and the coloreds were actually not there because the teachers were not there to teach this subject, and the subject is is displayed as a very difficult subject. And these 60% under 35, particularly the lower, those who are in school, if they don't do maths and science, then that 60% has a very difficult implication for the country.
Okay, all right. Table number 8, Mguni Matoli.
Good morning. Good morning. In the light of poor mathematical results at matric level, what I would like to ask the Statistician General is that, what are you doing to emphasize the need to teach mathematics so that we have statisticians? Because out there, people tell learners that do engineering and pass your maths well. So I would like to know, what can we do to ensure that they do statistics and put the message across as they do in engineering? Thank you.
All right, he's very polite. That's why his voice was down a little bit. Yeah. But essentially what he's saying is, in the light of the poor maths results, the emphasis on studying maths, what can we do to make sure people are studying more maths, to create more engineers, and perhaps another statistician general? So what can we do to create more learning in that area?
I mean, in Korea, Premier Parker said, you mathematics teachers, you will have double intake, and you will teach math.
Wow.
That's how, and Korea is where it is today. I'm not suggesting that in democratic South Africa we'd have to do that. But I think if the outcome is the right outcome, then the end probably might justify the means. I think if we cannot go through the painful process, we cannot expect better results. If we are going to avoid this kind of situation, because the whole thing is that when you give attention to these children, and we do experiment in our office, including in Silvertown, where they were saying they want water, they want this, and I said, well, I don't have water, I don't have electricity, but we can take 12 of your children here and put them through this maths, and we will actually take those who have failed and who have done maths literacy. Because it is not dealing with the stars that have already shined, because they shine anyway, but dealing with the 80% that has failed. When you've cracked that, then you know you have solved the problem. You can't solve the problem of 5% because that problem is solved anyway.
Right.
It's claiming victory over things that we haven't actually done anything about. But it is focusing on those kids that are doing math literacy and failing mathematics that we have to focus. The thing about math literacy is that even children who could do mathematics now do math literacy. So it's a very... So, Dadem Guni, if it is you who is asking the question, you know we work together. We've been meeting together and talking about this. he's turned his house into a classroom in Soweto. And he doesn't only teach children maths, but he teaches children life skills. And by cracking the issues at home, he's able to open these children's minds towards mathematics. And it is solving those kinds of problems that are necessary now.
Okay.
Because the migrant labor system and everything, I mean, the poor are almost similar to the rich. You have a shack here and then you have a rondavel somewhere else. The rich has a mansion here in Sandton and a very beautiful house by the beach in Cape Town.
Well, as you're saying that, I think this leads us very nicely to our next question from Annie, table number 6.
Dumela moratiwa.
Oh, my. She has just said Sinyamo and say, man, say statistics can't try.
Gunile hantle.
Kipela.
Lina la kakeki animalan. My question is around wealth distribution. I want to understand
Do you want to just put the mic a little bit?
what the gap looks like between the poor and the rich in South Africa. Is that gap closing? Is it broadening? And also, you spoke elaborately about the 307,000 Rand annual income and the difference between black and white. And I just want to understand, if you move a little bit higher up, the annual income may be R1 million a year or more, if there's a bit of a close again with a gap between black and white. Kia leboga Morena.
Thank you very much. Indeed, there is a closing of the gap because it's a function of acceleration. That you started at a point in time you start. And then over time, depending on how you accelerate, and the acceleration in the amongst blacks is showing that it is much faster than the whites. So in time, yes, it will close. But the estimate, if we look at that, it's in about 5 decades. But acceleration is a function of difficulties. Initially, you'll accelerate much faster. But at a certain point, you'll slow down your acceleration because there are major social and other things that stop you from accelerating. So if we were to assume a straight line, in about 5 decades, this equality will occur. But what may inhibit it in the future is not known. For instance, availability of light in a black household makes the child to read better. But it's not only that, there are other support systems that have to be there to even make the acceleration better. So there is a point at which there might be deceleration, and the scientific community and the academia have now to answer the question and ask the question, what needs to be done? First, to sustain the acceleration. Second, probably to slow down, cut down on the time. 5 decades is too long. I mean, all of us might have been long dead by the time when this happens. But we need to see it probably in our lifetime. So those are the things that we would like to do.
But I mean, can you really ever have equality? Because, I mean, you almost have to have a situation where you've got white people living in shacks to get that kind of equality. Unless we're comparing certain income bands, we can say, okay, comparatively, because the black middle class has grown significantly. So maybe we can compare that and say, the future date, it'll be... But I can't believe that at the bottom end, that there will ever be equality.
No, that is a very difficult, it's utopia, and it doesn't help. It doesn't happen quite that fast. I think what one is asking is, more generally, when will class define society rather than race?
Okay.
And we are saying that in another 50 years, class could be the dominant feature of our definition of society rather than race. So, but differences will be there. But what is happening is that the gap is closing because of the acceleration amongst blacks. But in terms of higher income bands, in fact, 1 million blacks plus have moved ahead as individuals.
I notice also that the white population is much older, so there's fewer and fewer younger people. Is that going to play into that?
Well, indeed, it has to, because as people get older, they are less productive. And that space has to be taken up by the younger population. But it's doing what whites and Indians have done minus apartheid. Because you have to remove apartheid from the equation. Because if we say whites have done, then you have to factor in apartheid and Verwoerd and everything. But we have to remove that equation from the equation and say, these are the things that have to be done so that this journey is achieved much faster.
All right, table number 9, Precious. I can't quite read your surname here, so if you could just help me with that. Table number 9, Precious, if you could say your name and then ask your question.
Thank you, Peter. It's Precious Ngayana. It's got a click.
Okay, all right.
Do stats really affect the direction of the country and the government policy? If so, does it happen almost immediately or it takes a few years before that could come into effect? Thank you.
It's a good question.
Well, we don't have taste buds. And we've just been talking to Peter here saying, the only taste buds I have are around the quality of the data. And this is the discussion that we are having with the two professors of Cape Town around what defines the quality. That's the only taste bud I have. I don't have taste buds for policy. I don't know when things are happening.
But the
better.
policymakers must come to you and say, look, this is the information we need to have. In drawing up your questionnaire, you don't just say...
Oh, yes, no.
Yeah?
Oh, they do. The what is defined by the policymakers. The policymakers ask us the what, and we provide the data that they have asked for. Now that the data is there, the information has to be shared. The problem is, traditionally, statistics are thrown over the fence, and the policymaker have to catch it, and try to deal with it. That doesn't work. It is a process of interaction with the risk of the statistician finding themselves entangled in policy discussions, or the risk of the policymaker saying, oh, I don't trust your statistics. But it is that interaction that has to be had. That stretches transparency in the methods, that stretches the quality of the information, and that makes for better policy outcomes and policy decisions.
Okay. Table 16, Refilwe. Table 16.
From the DA. Just want to understand, other than the perception of people moving to provinces for greener pastures, Gauteng and Western Cape, clearly there's a big jump from 2001 to 2011. What are the other contributing factors to the migration? Thank you.
It's very difficult to say. We haven't really investigated that adequately, save for general theory, which would say people will search for greener pastures and they will move. And indeed, we see that movement occurring, and we see it occurring amongst the more daring, the more educated, and so on. But we also see it occurring amongst the less educated who are in search for greener pastures. I think also the fact that service delivery is slightly better in those provinces, people would like to be there. What is also happening is that not only are people now moving as individuals, at a later point, they do the Sifikile effect is taking root both in the Western Cape and Gauteng, where families individuals are joined by their households and relatives. And I think those are the things. The question probably that has to be asked is, what are the future, how are the cities going to be like in the future of South Africa? There's a very interesting theory around this ZIP theory around the hierarchy of space and urbanizations using the Urban Function Index, that the highest city to the lowest is a proportion of that city. That we see as a phenomenon in South Africa. But as accompanying it in South Africa, it's a decadence in these centers, whereas in other areas, it is actually a bit of prosperity. Here we see a lot of unemployment in these centers, a bit of decadence, and the policy question that has to be asked is, what needs to be done to resolve this? And when we look at the presentation and or rather the statistics, it appears that if you were to classify and analyze the data control it by race group, you can see that education plays a major role in ensuring that while the ZIP theory stands, there are other attributes that have to accompany it, such as education and the quality of the population.
Okay.
as defined by education.
All right, table number 15, Stelo Dlamini. Table number 15.
Good morning. I just wanted to find out from the Statistician General whether it will be actually possible, because I mean we are also in the field of actually doing some interventions and also trying to actually solve some of the issues that are actually related to diseases. I'm actually from the Department of Health. I just wanted to find out whether it would actually be possible to get some of this data to use and also to actually do our planning up to a world level.
Well, the beauty of the census is that it comes at small areas. For planning the census, you have to cluster dwellings into 120 each for purposes of execution of the process. And then aggregate it. And in terms of aggregation, you have to have a rational way of aggregating it into wards, things that are development-oriented, like villages, suburbs, and so on. So the data is at those kinds of levels. And it has this variable geometry that you can use for your own planning purposes. Indeed, we went out to collect the data for use. We wouldn't like to keep it with ourselves because then we'll reduce its use. The danger of doing that is that now everybody knows about the data and they know it much better than we could know it had we kept it to ourselves. And that's the beauty of this process, that it enriches our understanding of ourselves. And this is where I get a little bit irked by the idea that the data was rushed, it was put into the public domain too quickly. I'm saying it has to be in the public domain so that whatever it is that is in it, good or bad, wrong or right, has to be should encourage the discussion. To keep it in the fridge and hope that when you open the fridge it will be different doesn't work. It has to be there.
Is this information that you can refine over time? You've got a date where you say, okay, this is the best guess today, but more information comes as the months that follow. Do you tweak those figures?
No, not. You don't tweak the figures because the data is the data, as you call it.
Yeah.
What you do is you gain insights into what might have been the deficiencies. For instance, one of the deficiencies that we see in the 96 and 2001 census, including the 2007 community survey, is that our assumptions around decline in fertility, as assumptions around the 0 to 4 then, actually may not have been correct because we are held by our previous knowledge. And previous knowledge plays a very critical role in your current understanding of your state and, of course, the influence of how you... That is why we are surprised by the 0 to 4 at the moment.
So are we satisfied that we're comparing like with like? Are we adjusting to make sure that the stats of 2006 or compare so that we can make proper comparisons?
Oh yes, these things are worldwide through the United Nations Statistics Commission. There is a process by which you review things so that you can correct for whatever deficiencies were there in the prior period. Those things do happen.
All right. Yeah. Table number 4. Is that Kenneth? People are writing like doctors in here. Is it Brown? It's not Branagh, is it? No, not the actor.
It's Kenneth Brown.
Oh, okay.
It's Kenneth Brown from the National Treasury. Actually, I thought let me maybe just add to the work that the Statistician General has done by just maybe giving an indication on how national government and the Treasury in particular is using this information. At the provincial level, we will be allocating about 350 billion next year, and over the 3 years we'll be allocating close to 1 trillion to provinces using a formula which uses about 80% of the census data. Over and above that census data, we use the income and expenditure survey data, which was released last week. We also use...
By the same organization.
By the same organization.
Yes.
And we use GDP data per province as well, which is also released by the same organization. So in terms of that, it's quite a bit of useful information for us to distribute resources horizontally amongst provinces. At a municipal level, we now know in each and every municipality
what access is to basic services or the lack thereof to basic services. And a big chunk of that we use basically, or at least 95% of that information we use in the formula that allocates resources to each and every municipality. Then the important one is, now that we know all of this information, we've got other grants, like the Municipal Infrastructure Grant, for example, that goes to municipalities. Now we know 70 of the municipalities, they still struggle with access to basic water and sanitation. Now that we know that information, we will be revisiting and say, is the grant efficient? Do we need to configure it differently? What are the other factors that are hampering there? So the information, as the Statistician General has said, is the 3 billion worth spending, actually, because now it puts us in a better position to plan ahead as a country for both provinces and municipalities. Thank you.
Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. But interesting question for you is, do you help people better understand the statistics? So some figures are obvious, some stats perhaps, but as you were saying, you get a better insight. You guys have been living this. So can people come to you and say, okay, yeah, this is great, but can you help us unpack it more?
Yes, indeed. I mean, this is the transition that statisticians have to make right across the world. The kind of value add, because of the distance they have in terms of the production of statistics and policy implications, that discussions has never been had. And statisticians are very rarefied, people who sit behind the computer, that's what they do most of the time. And they fear intersection with politicians because they don't have the stature to discuss issues. But that's where the value add of statistics has always been lost. And by politicians, I'm not meaning people who are in party politics, but politicians across, because people who are heads of firms and all industry, they play a political role in terms of that leadership and management. And it is the value add that statisticians have to play to shed light on what the figures actually say. And I think for the first time, we've had a very, very, very strong intersection and inter-discussions. You see, you need to have that interaction. Otherwise, the value of statistics is lost. Statistics get misinterpreted. And then, of course, in terms of the UN fundamental principles, principle number 4, the Statistician General has the power to rebuke anybody who misuses statistics. But you cannot say they misuse it until you know that they know it and they understand it. And it is the responsibility of statisticians to bring to light that understanding. Having done that, then any misinterpretation or abuse of statistics is subject to that kind of review.
Okay, more Jericho water. Okay, all right. Let's go to table number 12, Luigi Florio.
Pali Lehohla. Ntate Lehohla, Ononzo bua pele about the changes in data, especially the surprise in the Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. Was that the most significant change that you experienced while doing the census?
Indeed, I think that was the most significant, because the other changes that are occurring with our regular surveys, like the General Household Survey, which we modularize and get depth in terms of what is the service delivery situation in South Africa, what is happening to the marginalized groups like women, children, and the elderly. We have a sense of the trend. So in terms of those variables, we know. But it was this level issue that was quite a surprise. I'm sure as we move into municipalities, individual municipalities, we are likely even to see bigger surprises. But that was the main surprise that jumped at us.
All right, okay, we're going to take another quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue to unpack these figures. And don't forget, you too at home still have an opportunity to have a conversation with the Statistician General, Atumbuli Vuyo, at Peter Ndoro, Twitter addresses, also hashtag TNA BizBrief, and you can also send us an email, morninglive@sabc.co.za. Use this opportunity. The Statistician General has all the answers, and he's good at telling the story. Stay with